know really. I wouldn't know really because I'm from West Kerry and John B. Keane is from North Kerry. And Andy said, "Oh," and he said, Eamon Kelly, would you see that John B. Keane's play is anyway?" And he said, "'Tis the same for me, boy. I'm from East Kerry, and John B. Keane would be from North Kerry." And the person with me anyway looked at me and I said, "I'm from South West Kerry, and it's different again." So every region in Kerry is different. So Seán O'Conaill was a storyteller, a seanchai. He was born on the 21st of January, 1853, and he died the 21st of May, 1931. He had a photographic memory. Somebody could read him a story out of a book and he would remember it. And he's one of those storytellers who would be very true to that story. He would never make a mistake. He would repeat it as is all the time. He kept the story kind of sacred in a way. I know I've read a great book about African tribes and the way they keep stories, and it takes years upon years upon years to remember the stories because they're fantastically long and multi-layered, but they have to get it right every time. They can't make a mistake. I would never do there because I keep mixing it up and changing it around as I go. But Seán O'Conaill was like that. He kept the stories very sacred. Once he heard it, that was it. It was imprinted in his mind. And he loved stories. He really, just from a very young age, he loved listening to them. He loved taking them in, and he loved telling them. And he would travel around. As he was growing up, he said himself that there must have been different kinds of rambling houses. There was rambling houses for younger people, which was more at a music and dancing and playing cards and carousing, as they say here. And there must have been an older type rambling house where it was more sedate and there was stories going. And Seán O'Conaill kind of, he didn't feel he missed out, but he wouldn't really go where the young people were going. He would go to the older people to hear the stories. And if there was a new traveller, a travelling tradesman or a tailor, he would make them off to make sure he'd hear what stories they had. And as time went on, and even back in 1923 is when this great alignment happened that Seamus O'Dilearga came from Dublin. So you'd Seán O'Conaill, who loved his stories, but as he was getting older, and it's amazing, back in 1923, Seán O'Conaill was very upset about the way the Irish language and the Irish culture were dripping away and people weren't noting it better. It's amazing. Even back then, he could see, and he was losing stories. He was very upset about. He was very obsessed about telling his stories. And there's a beautiful story up in Keelreely. There's a lot of rocks up there, but every stone he told the story to. So all those stones up there has like every stone has a particular story that he kind of ingrained into it. So he would walk around to make sure he could remember the stories, and he would tell this story to this stone and tell a different story to another stone. And then Seamus O'Dilearga was a professor of Irish in UCD, and he wanted to learn Irish as it was spoken by the people. And one of the strongest Gaeltachts was down here in Ivara at the time. So he came down from Dublin. He's from Donegal himself. And he came down from Dublin and he went to Glenmore first. He stayed the first night in Cahardaniel, went to Glenmore, and then ended up in Keelreely because they were saying there's a man up there, he is beautiful Irish, and he's mad to talk to people. And that was Seán O'Conaill. So back in 1923, that's when they met. And Seamus O'Dilearga was there to learn Irish and to pick up the Irish that the Irish people were speaking in the Gaeltacht. And as he was learning the Irish, Seán O'Conaill kept telling him the stories that he had and wanted to preserve them. And Seamus O'Dilearga then realised you know, the Irish is important, but all these stories, all this folklore is very important. So he went back up to Dublin. He went to, I think it's Scotland or else Oxford, and studied folklore, came back to UCD as a folklorist, and came back to Keelreely to collect the folklore and started the Folklore Commission, which is in UCD, and the Dukas collection and all that in Dublin. So out in Ballinskelligs and Seán O'Conaill's fireplace is where the Folklore Commission started, which is very exciting, and you can still sit there. It's an artist retreat centre now, and I've stayed there as well. And it's so amazing to sit in that fireplace to see what kicked off from there. And it's really, it's very exciting. And I suppose for me growing up, I would share that love of story always, no matter what was going on. My parents, I was born in 1970, and my parents were both 45 at the time. So I kind of had a foot in both worlds. I was growing up in the 70s and the 80s, but my parents were like my grandparents in a way. So I had a very old way of life. We had a donkey and car going to the creamery. We milked the cows by hand. My dad was a blacksmith, so he was always making harness in the winter, but shoeing horses and stuff. So I had that very old Ireland at home, and going out into the world and having a very new Ireland. But I could see the currency of story, I suppose. The idea that if you came back and you were kind of in trouble, if you had a good story, you'd nearly get away with it. And stories were very important. If you just said, where are you going? Out, you were in trouble. But it said, where are you going? Oh, wait till I tell you, we're going here. This could happen. I'm going to meet that person, but you don't know if there might be a fight yet. And my parents were kind of almost, oh, go on away, come back with the news again. And you could see that. And even today, I was just thinking, I live my life through stories, through kind of a series of narrations in a way. I look back and it's almost kind of growing up in a fantasy land in a way, that you use story, you narrate your life. So you're kind of drawing a line under it because you're creating the story, and it's not very good, it's not very bad, it's just the way it is. And I've always worked with stories then, being an artist, I'm a community artist, working with different groups. Stories have been very, very important. And then I kind of wanted to bring the stories out into another realm. So I started creating puppets and backdrops, and then bringing the stories alive. And one of the first puppet shows I ever did was based on a story from Seán O'Conaill about the shoemaker and the devil. And it's a very old story. It's in an awful lot of collections, and it's in nearly every country in the world has some shape or form. And that's very interesting as well. In Seán O'Conaill's book, there's versions of The Taming of the Shrew. There's versions of stories in books I found from Sri Lanka. There's so many different stories, and you wonder, how did they end up in Ballinskelligs and in Seán O'Conaill's collection? But that's from all the people traveling and stuff. So the puppet show I created was all about Betty and Bab's hair salon. And things were going very well for Betty and Babs. And things then were going downhill with the recession, and there was nobody getting their hair done, and people were doing DIY jobs for themselves. And then one day, a dark stranger walked in, and he had two pointy horns on his ears and a black and red cape. And he sat down and he said, hello. And Betty said, hello, how are you? I'm good, thanks. How are you? Oh, I'm not too bad. Business could be better, you know, we could all do. Yeah. How'd you like all the money you could ever desire? Oh, Betty said, please. Hell, all the money you could ever want. Oh, Betty said, oh my God. Yes, I can give you all the money you ever desire. Oh, and Betty was thinking, and she said, what would be the cost? What would I have to give? And the stranger said, All I want in return is your soul. Betty was very worried, and she had a quick chat with herself outside, and she was saying, could I do this? All the money I ever needed, all the money I ever desired, but I'd have to relinquish my soul. But then again, I'd have all the money I ever needed or ever desired, but would I relinquish my soul? Would she do it? Could she do it? And she said she would. And she went back in and she said, it's a deal. Now you have to tell me, is hell hot or is it just very lukewarm? Because if I'm going to hell, I have to make sure that the hair is all right and it won't get frizzy or anything like that. And he said, who said anything about hell? She said, aren't you the devil? Aren't you Beelzebub? Aren't you the dark one? Aren't you the prince of evil? And he said, no, I'm an assistant manager of the RIP bank, and I have your soul. And from now on, you'll be paying back term loans, turning overdrafts into term loans, and trying to figure out what the bank charges mean. You can have your money for a year and a day, but I'll be back. So, as we all know, when you're spending money, time goes very quickly. And Betty was spending all her money, and she was having a great time. And eventually, it was getting very close to when the assistant manager of the RIP bank was coming back. And she was getting very worried. And who should walk in? Only Christabel, the local angel from the credit union. And she told Christabel her whole story and about how she sold her soul to the assistant manager of the RIP bank. And she was very worried about having to give her soul for eternity to him and to be paying overdrafts and trying to turn overdrafts into term loans and trying to figure out the bank charges. And Krista said, I can't help you there, but I can give you this magic bag. And if you can get the assistant manager of the RIP bank in there, you can turn them into whatever you want. Betty said, we'll try that. So that was all right. The time came for the assistant manager to arrive and take Betty's soul forever. And he said, hi, I hope you had a good time while you were spending all that money. Oh, she said, I had a great time. I was in TK Maxx and I was in IKEA and I was here and I was there and I was spending absolutely everything. It was fantastic. Well, it's about time we'd had our deal now. Oh, 'tis, of course. I spent absolutely everything except a dirty old tuppence that a baby shat on, an old man spat on, and it went through the constitution of a cow. And the assistant manager just loved dirty money. And he said, oh, where is it? Where's that dirty tuppence that a baby shat on, an old man spat on, and it went through the constitution of a cow? Let me see it. And she said, oh, it's over in the bag there. And he went over and he was looking into the bag and he was seeing if he could see the coin. And he said, it doesn't smell very dirty in here. And she said, have a good whiff. And she pushed him into the bag and she tied up the top of it and she had him inside. And who should arrive in? Only Babs of Betty and Babs Hair Salon. And Betty filled her in on everything that was going on. And Babs said, how about turning him into a constipated pigeon over the head of Donald Trump? And Betty was saying, I don't know, that's not bad enough at all. We have to come up with a really, I have it. Why don't we turn him into an old storyteller down in Portmagee with a load of goats and he'll never make any money? And Betty and Babs lived happily ever after. So that was one of the first stories I kind of took from Seán O'Conaill book and changed it around. It's quite funny. I was saying earlier that he was very much a traditionalist and loved saying the story off by heart almost, or word for word every time. I don't know what he would make of that, but it was great fun, and it was a time in my life because there was trouble with the banks when I was 21. When I was about 19, I was all very excited about bank accounts, and I was like Pinocchio being taken in and signing off on a pension that I was paying into at 21 or 19. So at 21, I was trying to get out of it, and there was all kinds of consternations with the bank and everything. So to me, it was the devil and stuff, and it kind of started a way of thinking then, and a way of subverting stories and taking bits out and putting bits in, and what would be the best way to see that story or to change that story around. And another two beautiful stories. One, both of them really, in a sense. One story I would hear my dad tell a lot, and it was very amazing then when you see the story that you hear your dad telling written in a book from 1923. You almost feel your dad is famous. You almost feel your dad has his finger on the pulse and he's part of something big. And eventually now I know that to be true, but at the time it was very exciting. It kind of, I don't know, it just made me feel, oh, wow, this is the power of story is big. So a lot of the stories, and a lot of my dad would talk about, was Seán O'Laoghaire, the poet. And he was traveling around Cork and Kerry district, and he was a very clever poet. So the story goes that Seán O'Laoghaire was heading somewhere along the road, and he met this young boy who was in a fierce panic and a fierce rush to get to the parish priest, because there was an old lady dying in the village, and he had to get the priest to go and do the last rites. And Seán O'Laoghaire looked up at the sun, and he looked at his watch, and he said, He said, I'll write out a piece of paper now for you. And if the priest goes with you straight away, forget about the piece of paper, throw it away, don't ever let anyone see it. But if he doesn't go with you straight away, read this out to him. So the boy went to the priest, and he racked up. He told him the story that this woman was very sick in the village, and he'd have to come with him straight away to do the last rites. And the priest looked up, and he looked at this clock, and he said, do you know, it's just about dinner now. I'll sit down, I'll have something to eat, and I'll head down after you, and I'll see you after dinner. So the little boy got the piece of paper anyway, and he took it out, and he said, low be the patient, weak be the sinner. Let the soul have its chance, but you'll have your dinner. And he said, that's a message from Seán O'Laoghaire. And it just shows the cleverness of Seán O'Laoghaire. But again, as I say, it was something my dad would repeat a lot. Weak be the patient, low be the sinner, let the soul have its chance, but I'll have my dinner. And it's funny in a way, because that, myself and my sisters can actually quote that to ourselves. Well, I'll have my dinner now. Whatever else is going on, I'm going to look after myself here. I'm going to have my dinner. So it's kind of folklore in action, which is fantastic. I'm scratching a little bit a lot because the midges are out and they're feasting upon me. So the second story, and again, I would have heard people say this catchphrase, and then to hear where it comes from, and then to read it in this book was just amazing. It was just something giving credence, I suppose. And the story goes about Seán O'Laoghaire, again, the scholar that was going around from house to house, and he might read poetry, he might help somebody write letters. There was a business in that as well, because a lot of people didn't read and write. So the student would go around, and the poet would write letters for people as well if they wanted to write to the landlord or whoever. And he came into this farmer, and this farmer was very proud, because this farmer had a cat. And every evening while the farmer ate his dinner, he had trained the cat to sit at the corner of the table and hold a candle. So Seán O'Laoghaire was very excited to see this, and the farmer was very proud to show him. He came in, his dinner was served up, he put the candle in the cat's paws, and the cat held the candle while the farmer ate his dinner. So Seán O'Laoghaire made a wager with the farmer. He said, now, if I can get your cat to drop the candle, you'll give me all your dinner for the week. And if I can't make the cat drop the candle, I'll give you a week's work for nothing. Oh, the farmer was delighted with this, and he said, oh, bitches, this is a great wager, because there's no way I've trained that cat to hold the candle. So that was all right. The next night, Seán O'Laoghaire was working away. He came in, the farmer had his dinner put in front of him. He put the candle into the cat's paws, And Seán Rua, in his pocket, he had a little mouse. And he let the mouse down on the table and it ran across. And the cat looked and kept holding the candle. So the next night came. Seán had done a hard day's work. The farmer brought in his dinner again. He sat down, the cat held the candle, and Seán had 2 mice in his 2 pockets. And he let one go and it scurried across this way, and he let the other one go and it scurried across that way. And the candle kind of shook this time, and the cat looked in both directions, but he continued to hold the candle. Well, the next night, Seán wouldn't be done. He did a hard day's work, but I tell you, he came back with a bag with about 20 mice in it. And he just threw the bag up on the table. Mice went everywhere. The cat threw the candle, went after the mice, and Seán Rua won the wager. And the catchphrase he had for the farmer was Brishin an dúchas trí hula an quit. And Brishin an dúchas trí hula an quit means Dúchas breaks out through the eye of a cat. Now, again, I mentioned Dúchas earlier in the folklore collection, and Dúchas is heritage, but it can mean, it can almost mean genetic properties, what's in you, what's in the cat is in the kitten, that kind of thing, that if you are meant to be something, then you will be something. And that's the Brishin an dúchas, the Dúchas will break out, and you, oh, that's Dúchas, and again, growing up, you would hear everybody talking about Dúchas, and oh, sure, that's Dúchas, and if it was like, if the family were tall, then the child was going to be tall as well, unless there was some carry on that we didn't know about. But that should be, it isn't a Dúchas to be tall, they would say. So again, it was lovely to hear those 2 stories before I knew there were stories from Seán O'Conaill, and there were folklore stories, and they were told all over the place. I just thought they were our little stories at home, you know. And there's another story then about the Gubán Sayer. And the Gubán Sayer was a builder usually who went around from place to place working. Now, it is the Gubán Sayer, but it was more about 2 brothers, Seán and Donal, who were from Ballinskelligs, and they had to go to Portmagee for a king to build him a boat. And they had the reputation that every boat they built was better than the last boat they built. And that would be the best boat ever in Ireland to be built. And of course, the king knew this reputation, and he wanted them to build the best boat for him, but he didn't want anybody else to have a better boat. So he had planned on killing them once the boat was finished. And so he would have the best boat in Ireland, and it would continue to be the best boat in Ireland until the very last day, until he died or the boat fell apart. So Seán and Donal went down anyway, and they were working away in the boat, and things were going fine. And there was a girl in the employ of the king, and she heard his plan. She heard him telling his henchmen to be watching Seán and Donal, and if the boat was going to be finished, to be sure to kill them before it was finished. But not to kill him earlier on, just to kill him at the right moment. And she heard all this. So she told Seán and Donal to be very careful and never to let on that the boat was nearly finished, because the king was out to kill them. And they said, oh, very good. They thanked her and everything. And so they were going on, and they were working away at the boat, and they kept going. And the king came down anyway, and he said, surely be to God you'd have the boat finished by now. And they said, we nearly are. We've only a small bit in there. So look, if you have a look at all. So he went in to have a look at the boat, at the keel of the boat, you know, the edge there. And then they let the boat go, and it took the head off the king. Well, Seán and Donal were very worried. They reckoned now that the people of this place, his servants, his dominion, would come after them and kill them. And very quickly, word got out that they'd killed the king, and wasn't upset and looking for revenge, but was only celebrating they were, because he was a bad king and they didn't like him, and they were delighted that Seán and Donal got rid of him. So they put Seán and Donal up on their shoulders, and they brought him over from Portmagee over to a river, to a bridge, and they headed off their way to Ballinskelligs. And that bridge is called Anagar Bridge. And I always thought it was Aha, like the ford, a short ford, Aha Gara, Anagar, Gar as in short. But it's actually Aha Gara, because they were so happy and laughing. It's the ford of the laughter, which is a beautiful name. Anagar Ahagara, to celebrate the death of the king back in Portmagee. So again, it's place names and things like that. And again, you experience place names. It gives you a real sense of place when you know what the name of a place is. Like at the moment, I'm in my, this is a field that I'm trying to create into an office. So, but and it's in Owenbui, and it's Owenbui, the Yellow River, because the water that comes down from the mountain has a brownish hue to it because of the bog, and I'm sure there's probably chemicals maybe as well in the mountain that make the water brown. It's never really clear, but that's the Owenbui, and that's a nice name as well. And we've Imlach Peishta across the way here as well. And some people reckon it's Imlach Poishta, the field of the children, rather than the field of the monster. But I suppose there's some people that would put the two together. So along the way, last February the 15th, I became 50. And I had kind of made the decision that one thing I wanted to do was start to cultivate wisdom, because I have a lot of life experiences, just like everybody else, but I really wanted to make sure that these experiences weren't just lost out in the world, that I wanted to measure them, equate them, give them weight, and really bring wisdom into everything I do, because I've been I've been a bit unwise in making decisions, but I really wanted to cultivate wisdom. And it's so funny with the lockdown, it just came about. I have a lot of goats around here, and I milk some of them, and some of them have kids. And it started very quietly, very easy. I started pointing the camera at the goats, telling the stories of the goats, who they were, whose mammy was who, and some of them were kidded during filming. And then telling little stories, little parables almost, fables. And it was very interesting because I wasn't in the frame, it was the goats visually, and it was me speaking and telling the story. It almost, it took my ego out of it, and it gave full power to the stories. And it's really worked well, and it's a really good combination. A pheasant has just landed outside the office there. And there's another lovely story. Now, some part of Seán O'Conaill book is very sad in a sense, because some stories he can't remember the end, some stories he can't remember the middle, and he gets more and more upset about this as it goes along, I think, because that was his great worry, and it did come about that, I mean, the Welsh, this is his book. As you can see, it's well worn and well read, but not just red, the color, but there's a wealth of stories in here. But he was saying if he knew that people would want to collect the stories, he'd have worked harder to remember more, which is so sad for him. But we still have a lot, and I'm still carrying it on, which is great, you know. And there's one story that I put the end to it, which was nice. I was able to slot in my own little frisson. So this story is all about the first monk, the first Christian monk that came to Ivera. And he set up his little chapel in his small little stone. A man gave him a bit of ground, and he was very happy with that. And he would have sermons, and people would go in and they would listen, and some would be interested and others wouldn't be that interested, and they'd go away again. And so anyway, Tig went in one day out of the rain, I think, more than anything, and he heard one of the sermons. And the monk was inside telling him that he was looking for animals, farm animals, and whatever you got, you would receive twice the reward in heaven. So Ty didn't hear anything about heaven, but he was saying, geez, whatever you give, you get twice back. Sure, that's a great investment. And he was very excited about this. And he went home to his wife, caught the grip, they called her, and had a lovely black heifer, one of the nicest heifers, and she was a real pet. She would come in the evenings and she would sit down by the fire and she would heat the room as well. And Cort was mad about her. She was going to put her in calf and she'd have one of the best cows in the district. And that was all right. But Tig wanted to give the heifer to the monk and they would get twice back as a reward. And caught the grip. Sure, that's foolish. She said, that's coming to nothing. I'll keep my heifer. I know where she'll be, and we'll put her in calf and we'll have a fine cow the next day. And Tig was saying, no, it'd be much better if we gave it to the monk now because we'd get twice back. Sure, that's a brilliant investment. We don't know what he'd give us, but it'll be good anyway. And she said, oh, I don't know. No, there's no way. Anyway, Cort went down to the well to get water, and Tig was all excited. He caught the heifer put the headstall on the heifer and took her off to the monk. Well, there was fierce fighting that evening and Cort the Grip was not happy with her heifer being taken away like that. And of course, it didn't take too long. But of course, the heifer, who was such a pet, wasn't treated so well over by the monk. And she came home. She burst open the door one night when they were inside in bed. They heard the commotion. The black heifer burst in the door, sat down by the fire, and what was with her? Only a small little black bull. Now Tig said, wasn't I right? Wasn't that the great investment? We not only have the heifer back, but we have this beautiful black bull as well. And Cort was saying, I don't know, this spells trouble, I don't know, this is a wrong deal, I'm not too sure about this. And the next morning, there was a servant boy sent over by the monk to Tig and Cort the Grip. And he said, my master said to bring back the 2 cattle. Tig said, the 2 cattle? Sure, they are ours now. And the servant boy said, no, they belong to my master, the monk. You gave him the heifer and somebody else gave him the bull. But Tig said, what about getting back twice what you gave? We gave the heifer and we got the bull back now. Oh no, the servant boy said. So they all had to go off anyway to the monk, and there was a terrible disagreement and a fight going on between Cort the Grip, Tig, the monk, the bull, the heifer, and the servant boy mixed in, and the whole lot of it. And they said they'd have to go to the druid. The druid was one of the wisest men in the area, and he would know exactly what to do. So they took the heifer, they took the bull, they took the monk, they took the servant boy, Cort the Grip, and Tig went all over to the druid. And they explained the story to the druid, all about he was offering whatever you gave him, you would get twice back. And the monk said, you see, this you would get twice back in heaven. This is not in this realm. You would get your reward in heaven. So the druid came about anyway, and he said, you know, if you're giving rewards out in heaven, maybe that's where you should get your cattle as well. And Cort the Grip got her heifer back. The monk got the black bull, and they all lived happily ever after. So there's a lot of, there's some amazing, really long stories in there as well. And do you know what I love about Seán O'Conaill book? And I should have something marked in there. I'm so like, with the lockdown, I had some very simple jobs to do, to go down to milk the goats in the morning, give them water at lunchtime, and milk them in the evening again. And what I did during the lockdown for me was almost like, and it is, I suppose it's still going on, it seemed a bit like Sleeping Beauty, where I was kind of in a sleep and just away from everybody. And it was amazing to it's kind of getting back into it now and stuff like that. But these little videos kept me going along the way. But one of the, so I find it very hard to be focused, to be present in things. So I should have a little passage made out, picked out. But he has a beautiful way, because you must remember Seán O'Conaill, I don't think he went to school really, because near a vein Béarlaige, he didn't speak any English. He wasn't able to read and write, and he never left this little hamlet. And if you look for Keelreelig on the map, it's right out on Bolas Head outside Ballinskelligs. I think once he went to Killarney when he was very old to be recorded. There was this kind of tube that he spoke into, and there was a wax kind of a gramophone that recorded him. And I'm not too sure, I think it is available, that recording. It's very rare, but yes, he has all this wealth of stories, wealth of information, and it is great in a way that he didn't learn, because this is the English version, Seán O'Conaill book, but there's a beautiful Irish version that is very old, poetic Irish. It would be kind of hard to decipher, but I'm sure if you're a scholar, you'd be able for it. But I'm delighted to have the English version. And what I do love about his stories is he's got a kind of he would say things like, and your man had to go off to meet the king of Greece. And there was the king of Greece walking around when he went over. He's a kind of a very skewed view of the world. And sure, the king of Greece daughter came in from milking the cows, and she said, and his brother was the king of Spain instead of Greece. And he's got this great sense of kind of making the world small in a way, and making it about characters and about stories more than big kind of, he has stories about Finn McCool and stuff, but I suppose I love the folk tales which make the people more important, if you know what I'm trying to say, that they're the people are the heroes rather than the kings and queens and knights and stuff like that. He's got a very kind of feet on the ground approach, I suppose. And I suppose it is, I suppose it would be my favorite story, a story I used to tell to children about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. I'm not too sure what I tell it now. It's very interesting how times have changed, because, and again, it's in the book, and it's amazing because I would tell this book, you see, I would always have been quite dyslexic in school. I'm not diagnosed, but I would have a lot of reading difficulties and writing difficulties. I could talk for 6 hours. But if I have to read something out of a book, I fall apart. Every word is a huge challenge. Every syllable is like a knife in my heart. And so once I read the story to myself, it kind of gets imprinted and I run off with it. And it is amazing. I would be telling the story, changing things along the way to make the story as sharp as possible and as poignant as possible. And sometimes I'd go back and read the book and I haven't lost anything of the story, what was in there. And it's amazing. I do like that it's still there. And this story is all about a young man called Seán. And Seán was very happy. He lived with his mom and dad on a farm, and everything was really nice. Until one summer, Seán's dad died. And Seán's mother said, no, you're the man of the house. You will have to look after things. We have one good cow, and I reckon we should sell her, keep the money to survive over the winter, buy a calf in the spring, and start again. And she said, Seán, when you go to the fair, make sure that you get coins, because you have no experience of paper money. Make sure to get coins, and make sure to get £5 and no less. How much? £5 and no less. Well, Seán went to the fair. He was so excited. This was his moment to be a man. He put the headstall on the cow and he headed down into town, and he met 3 jobbers. Now, for anybody out there that doesn't know what jobbers are people who buy and sell cattle, and they're very clever and a bit sneaky. They're kind of like politicians, I suppose. So the 3 jobbers said to Seán, they said, Seán, what are you selling? Oh, he said, I have a fine cow here and I'm looking for £5 and no more. I went, £5 and no more. That's it. And I won't take paper money because I've no experience of paper money. I'll only take coins. Well, the jobbers were delighted with themselves. And one of them went into town to get the coins. And the other two helped Seán to put the cow into one of their enclosures that they'd take all the cattle away later. And your man came in and he had the coins and he was counting out 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, a pound, 2, 3, 4, £5 in coins. And Seán was all excited. And he went home to his mother and he said, Mom, I'm after selling the cow. And she said, how much did you get, Crater? Oh, he said, I got £5 and no more. £5 and no more? Yeah. And he threw all the coins up on the table. And she started counting. And she was throwing some into the fire, and some out the window, and some on the floor. And he said, Mom, what are you doing with all the money? And she said, Bain, I've never seen such a collection of buttons and Monopoly money and pot menders in my whole life. We've hardly any change at all left. You have the family ruined, but it's not your fault. I shouldn't have trusted you. You're too young. You'll end up in the workhouse. I'll probably, nothing will come of me, only the last long road out of here. But I suppose once your father died, it was the end of the family. And Seán said, if you give me what money we have left, I'll make sure to get back at those three lads and make sure we're one of the wealthiest families around. God, the mother said, I don't know about that. No, Seán said, please give me the money and whatever we have left, and I will get back at those three lads and we'll be one of the wealthiest families around, I promise. So the mother didn't think anymore. She gave him the money and Seán went shopping. And he bought a bottle of whiskey, he bought a big round wooden barrel, and he bought a tube of super glue. Even they had it back then. Is the video stopped? So,
no, it isn't. You're full steam ahead there, Seán.
Oh, very good. So he took the top off the barrel of whiskey. He got the bottle of whiskey and he super glued the bottle on, and he put the cork through the top of the barrel and into the bottle of whiskey. And then he proceeded to fill the barrel with the most disgusting, rotten, awful liquids that you can only imagine and I can't mention. It was awful. And he put the top on the barrel, and the next fair day, he rolled the barrel into town. And who were the first people he met? Only the three jobbers. Oh, they said, Seán, what have you for sale today? Oh, he said, I have a fine barrel of whiskey. And they said, how much would you be looking for the whiskey? He said, £10 and no more. They said, we'll have to try this whiskey now. Oh, he said, fine out. He very carefully took off the little wooden stop, lifted up the barrel, and what came out? Only beautiful whiskey. One of them actually had a glass in his coat pocket. And they tried the whiskey. They said, geez, this is great stuff. Haven't we the christening coming up? Wouldn't it be great to have a barrel of whiskey like that for the christening? Oh, they said, how much are you looking for it? £10 and no more, I told you. So they got £10 together. They gave him the right money this time, and they went off happy as Larry with their barrel of whiskey. And Seán looked after him and he said, I have to come up with a plan. So Seán went off to his mother again. The three lads were inside. And the day of the christening came. Well, there was such talk about this big barrel of whiskey. Everybody that was going to the christening took the day of the christening off. They took the day after the christening off. They took the day after the christening off. They were all excited. They milked early. They were all white shirts and dressed up, and they went down into they christened the child, of course, as well, but they had the party going on, and that was the big exciting moment. And they went in, and the three lads were inside, and the father of the child, he broke open the top of the... Sorry. Oh, everybody got sick all over the place. Nobody stayed for very long, only the immediate family, and they had a cup of tea and they left very quick. The three lads were trying to figure out how the whiskey went sour and so awful so quickly, because Seán, when the barrel and the cork and then they saw the top of the barrel, and they saw the bottle super glued to the top of the barrel, and they knew, and they said, now we are going to take our revenge and get our money off Seán. Well, Seán had been waiting for this moment, and he was out there and he was looking, and he had two little rabbits and a hutch outside the front door, and he took one rabbit up and he went outside the back, and he told his mother, do exactly as I said now, Mom. So he went out the back door. The three lads burst open the front door and they said, now, missus, we're looking for Seán. Where is he? Where is Seán? He owes us money. She said, hold on a minute. She went out to the hutch. She picked up the grey rabbit. She put it, she told it, she said, tell Seán he's wanted. And the rabbit went down. He went over the old road, west to the Haggart, up into the Park Garav. And the three lads were watching and waiting. And who should come in the back door with a grey rabbit in his hand only? Seán. And they said, Seán, how did the rabbit, you? And he said, how are you lads? What's going on? What can I do for you? They said, did the rabbit, and he said, guys, time is money now. What can I do for you? They said, did the rabbit go off and tell you that we were here? And he said, yeah, putting the rabbit into the hutch. What can I do for you? They said, you'll have to sell us the rabbit. You will have to sell us the rabbit, because that is fantastic. There's no way, we need that rabbit. There's no way you'll sell it to us. And he said, no, there's no way at all. My poor mother, he said, she can't be running around after me. I need that rabbit. And they said, no, sell us the rabbit, Seán. We've been great old pals. Sell us the rabbit. And Seán said, £20 and no more. Well, they had £20 in their pocket. They gave it to Seán. They took the rabbit and he said, you know what, lads, take the hutch as well. And they went down the mountain as happy as Larry with the hutch in their arms. And he said, I'll have to come up with a new plan. They went down anyway, and your man's wife was there, and they said, now, we're going up wiring to the top of the mountain. When the dinner is ready at 1 o'clock, send out the rabbit. The rabbit will tell us come down, and we'll come down and have our dinner. The wife said, okay. And they went off to the top of the mountain, and they were wiring above and tearing and working. And the woman said, right. She got the rabbit at 1 o'clock. She said, tell the lads their dinner is ready. And she put down the rabbit. It went over by the meadow, up again by the new field, over by the red shed, and was never seen again. The three lads were still above working and waiting for the rabbit, and there was no sign of the rabbit, and they were starved with the hunger. They were saying, where is the rabbit? And they came down and they said, Seán, or they said, where did you do with the rabbit? Oh, she said, I've let the rabbit down. I said, tell him that their dinner is ready. And the rabbit went off, and they said, that's mad now, because when Seán's mother and the rabbit and Seán came in, and we have been tricked again. And if we have, there is no missing this time. We are going up and we are getting our money. There's no more of it. And they marched up the road, but Seán was watching. And he said, Mom, now be ready, Mom, be ready. Do as I told you. So the mother was sitting down inside. They burst open the door and they said, now, Seán, we want our money. Tell us where our money is and we'll leave it at that. Oh, he said, I don't have any money. 'Tis my mom that has the money. And I don't think she wants to give it. And the mother said, she said something very rude. And if she did, Seán cut up a knife and he stuck it into her throat and she screamed and the blood poured down her dress onto the floor. The three lads were speechless. They said, what? You're after killing your mother? He said, don't worry at all, lads. Hold on for the crack. He got out a whistle. I can't whistle it all anymore. He whistled into her ear and she woke up and she smiled at everyone. And they said, Seán, you'll have to sell us that whistle. That whistle would be fantastic. There's no way, but you'll have to sell us that whistle. Oh, he said, no way at all. That mother of mine, she drives me crazy 10 times. I've killed her already 5 times this morning. They said, no, you'll have to sell us the whistle. We'll give you any money you want. Sell us the whistle and we'll call it quits. Sell it to us now. And Seán said, £100 and no more. Well, they were all excited. They counted out the money and they just had about the £100. They gave it to Seán and down the mountain they went with the whistle. And they were all excited with this great whistle. And they were going down and Seán looked out and he said, I'll have to come up with a big plan this time. Well, they went down anyway and they were waiting. And one of the brothers had this fine bull. But he was a cross devil. They couldn't hold him. And if they turned their back at all, he'd be pucking him and he'd be going at him. And they said, you know something? This will teach him a lesson. And your man that owned the bull cut the knife and stuck it into his neck and the blood poured down. But the bulleen didn't have the bag of pig's blood inside him like Seán's mother did. And he brought out the other two and he said, quick, come out. Well, come out for the crack. I'm after killing the bull. And they got the whistle and they whistled into his ear. Nothing. He said, tried you, the second fella. Nothing. Tried you, they said to the third fella. And the third fella went up. And no good. And they said, that fine bull and you're after killing him. What do you mean I'm after killing him? 'Tis Seán. Seán is driving us mad and he's taking all our money. This has to be the end of him. Well, they flew up. Seán didn't see him coming. They went up so fast and they opened the door. They caught Seán. They put him into a bag and they tied up the bag and they said, now, 'tis down into the dark well of Connachtnadubber you're going and that'll be the end of you. And they took him out. They threw a bag over one of their shoulders and the other two had sticks and they were baiting us as they went out and they kept going. And of course, a lot of journeys in Ireland between A and B, there's always a pub. They came across this pub and they said, you know what, we'll have a drink. We'll go off and get rid of Seán and we'll have a drink first. So they went in. They left Seán outside, tied up in the bag. He was there and he said, oh my God, this is it. This is it now. The next place I'll see is heaven. That's it. But sure, my dad is in heaven. Hopefully I'll meet him up there when I get to heaven. And coming down the road was this farmer who had a fine suit of clothes, a beautiful herd of cattle, and a big wad of money in his pocket. But he was very worried about all the double dealings he had done along the way, and he'd been a bit dishonest with things, and he was very worried, and he was mad to get to heaven. So he saw this bag, and it was moving, and he listened to the bag, and it was talking, and he said, could you get me to heaven? And Seán said, what kind of a person are you? Oh, I'm a very wealthy farmer. I have a fine suit of clothes, a beautiful herd of cattle, and a big wad of money in my back pocket, but I need to get to heaven. And Seán said, well, if you open up the bag, let me out, and you hop in, you should see heaven very quickly, I reckon. Oh, that would be brilliant, the farmer said. So he opened up the bag. Seán hopped out. He put on the fine suit of clothes. He took the beautiful herd of cattle, and he took the fine wad of money, and off he went. The three lads came out and they grabbed the bag again. They didn't know any different, and they were baiting it, and they took it up to the well and they threw it in. And that was the end of that. And they were walking down the road and they saw that fella and they said, who's that fella with the fine suit of clothes, the beautiful herd of cattle, and the big wad of money in his back pocket? I don't know. And they got closer and they said, geez, if we didn't know any different, it looks like Seán with the fine suit of clothes, the beautiful herd of cattle, and that big wad of money. But sure, he's just gone in. And they got closer and they went, Seán, what are you doing with the fine suit of clothes, the beautiful herd of cattle, and the big wad of money? Well, he said, lads, the riches down that well, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, there's credit cards, there's money, there's cars, there's everything you want there. You'll have to throw us down the well. He said, guys, I'm just going home. I want to get the cattle home to my mother. They said, no, we won't hear of it. You'll have to throw us down that well. Okay, he said. So he put the herd of cattle into a field and they went up to the dark well again and they were looking in and it was dark and it was deep. And the big fella looked in anyway and Seán caught him by the back legs and threw him in. And the other two said, Seán, what is he saying? Oh, he said, if you don't go down quick enough, he'll take all the riches himself. With that, the two of them hopped into the well. And Seán turned around. He went down the mountain. He took the cattle out of the field and he went home to his mother. And he said, now, Mom, I promised you that I would get back at those three lads and that we would be one of the wealthiest farmers around, and that's what I've done. And I've told that a good number of times, but I love the story in a way, because I suppose people have this idea that seanchais and old men in Ireland were very nice and twee and didn't have any kind of sex, drugs and rock and roll in their how would you say, their gamut of stories, you know, so their collection of stories. So it's always great to have, to show, because one thing I always say is the one thing that doesn't change from generation to generation in our ancestors are our emotions and our feelings of emotions, because Seán O'Conaill and his ilk and people of that time felt the same feelings and the same wanting to get ahead, looking for the hero to make money, the poor people to make money against the landlords and stuff like that. And I suppose we still have that today. Yeah, I think I'm good. If anybody, Liam, is there stories or questions?
Yeah, and thanks so much, Seán. That was absolutely riveting.
Thank you. It was lovely. And by the way, I've totally forgot. Sorry now, Liam. Yep. Just to say, if you want to find me, Seán O'Conaill. I'm on YouTube. There's seanchaí.com. And I'm on Facebook, Seán O'Conaill as well. And I promise now I'm going to wake up and answer all messages and be on top of social media and the whole lot. I'll get the goats on it.
That was absolutely brilliant, Seán. And I think everyone really enjoyed it. We had a big attendance tonight. It kind of brought me back to my granddad's from Achill. And I see some Achill people tuned in this evening. And he originally built a small enough house that my relatives still have down there. And I remember going to bed with a fire in the bedroom because he didn't have central heating. and going down to bed, and it was a bit of a rambling house. People would kind of come in the evenings, and I'd go to bed actually listening to all these stories, and I've a great grow for what you're doing. So well done.
Oh, thank you.
I think it's an aspect of our Irish folklore, our Irish history, that's kind of been forgotten. And people like yourself and Eddie Lennon have done a great job in keeping that alive and adapting it.
And I've met Eddie Lenihan 2 or 3 times now, but I must say he is so encouraging and such a generous person of spirit, of time, of everything. He's a beautiful person.
He is. Yeah, he's great, and he's kept it alive probably for probably another generation when it needs to be kept alive. When I've a couple of questions for you here, Seán. When did you realise this was a particular ability you had to tell these stories? Because it's actually a performance when you're watching you tell your stories.
I think because I did a lot of puppet shows and stuff like that, but I remember there was a time back in the 90s, would have been 97, 98, when Prince Charles was coming and there was a protest against him to Dublin. It would have been around the peace treaty time. But anyway, I was working in a school doing an art project. I think we were painting or something, and we'd finished early. And the teacher said, Seán will now tell you a story. And I was like, I don't tell stories. And it just burst out of me then. And I created a story about this Mr. Blotch, and he was trying to find somewhere to live. And it just took off, and I was doing the antics. And again, when I'm live, I'm kind of running around the room a lot. You never know where I'd end up. Because I remember there's a great singer, he's over in Wexford, Pierce Turner.
Yeah.
And I remember him being interviewed on Nighthawks when I was very young. And I just had to throw that in. And he was saying about he jumps up on tables, and he said, there's never like the possibility of losing your pint to make people engaged in the performance. And but yeah, that was back in 98, I think, when I told my first story like that.
And I'd be interested in, so we all know Eddie, and now we know about you, which is brilliant. Yes. And it's part of our folklore that you're keeping alive. Where do you see the role of the seanchai going into the future? Because I suppose it would have been very much, around the local pub or around the local rambling house and all that.
Yes.
But how do you see that adapting, I suppose?
I would see it adapting in, there's a lot of people out there like academics who have a story to tell about their research, but they're not able to do it. They either go too highfalutin or they talk in a language that nobody understands. There's business as well. There's a lot of business people out there that could do, there is this kind of new storytelling has been taken into this kind of realm of marketing, hashtagging, and it's like, it's okay, but you're kind of, do you know what it's like? It's like cutting a tree without its roots and sticking it in the ground and saying that's a tree. They don't have the root system and the trunk and the branches, and they could do with a lot of that, I think it's almost like bringing it back from the jaws of marketing, of spin doctors with politics, and rerouting it. I'm not saying don't do it, but have a proper idea of the story you want to tell and why you want to tell it.
And I've one final question for you now, and you probably won't even be able to answer this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Where did you pick up that particular skill from? You obviously have an ability to tell a story in a particular way. Was that
I think
acquired or genetic? Was it in your family?
It would be in my
generations.
Family. We are, first of all, my 2 sisters and my nieces and nephews would be very alert of what's going on around us. I can't imagine, like if we're walking along the road, we're taking in everything. We're bringing it all in together. And it's amazing, like my parents, even when they got older, like I would, like my dad lived in Carsavine for a while, and I would call in to visit him, and he would say, geez, I saw a great film last night. And he would tell you that film. He would tell you the story of the film. So he would break down 2 hours into maybe 15 or 20 minutes. My mom could do that as well. And I've noticed the younger generation, but we can all, as I say, we love the art of storytelling. Like my sister, I've one sister who's fantastic at sequencing a story of what happened when, that kind of way. And I have another sister who is very expressive of the moment and the kind of the emotion that's happening. And I'm not too sure where my skill set lies within that, but I think it is. And again, with my parents, we lived our lives through narration, because again, if something happened, they'd say, do you remember the day? And off we would go. That day we went to town that the cat puked. And we would retell it to ourselves, and we would bring in everything, do you know, that kind of way. And there was a great love of talking and listening and narrating what was going on around us almost, you know. So you would never experience something from the center. You were nearly always looking in and narrating from the outside.
Brilliant. And there's a couple of comments coming up on the chat there. Some people think you're actually from Kilkenny, but you did actually live in Kilkenny for a while, John.
I did. I lived in Thomastown, and I had a fantastic, and I met a great storyteller there called Maggie Moylett as well. And there's some great stories down there, and I love my time in Thomastown.
And I'm actually fascinated. How did you find the kind of cultural difference between Kilkenny and back home in Portmagee? Did you notice, was that a big difference for you?
It was. First of all, it was the greenery, you know, coming from the landscape here that's so sharp and kind of barren in a way, and going into Kilkenny that was so kind of lush and green. And you could see a difference in the people as well, that in Kilkenny there was a little bit more pale. Whereas, you know, there'd be more the wild men down here. But I met this wonderful woman, Maggie Moylett, who was a great storyteller, and she just had great stories as well. That could nearly do another hour talking about Maggie Moylett. Oh, it was beautiful over there.
Well, listen, I'm going to close it out at that, Seán, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
So much. Thank you, Liam. It was a great pleasure.
And thanks so much for keeping, I think, a really important facet of our Irish history and our Irish folklore alive. I think you're doing a magnificent job. I've known Eddie, followed Eddie Lennon for a number of years, and it's great to see it being passed on to a young chap like yourself. So thank you so much. There's so many positive comments coming in here on the thing. I couldn't possibly read them out, but I'll be here all night. But I will send them on to you later. Thank you so much. Everyone's really enjoyed the evening.
Thank you.
Slán go fóill.
Slán and Ishkara Margaret. Slán.